Hello, it's Brandon again. I'm back, and Changeville 2018 is over. It was amazing, and just like we did last year, we recorded the panels that happened during Changeville this year. We're excited to share with you all 4 of the panels, starting with how to use the arts to inspire environmental change. This panel was hosted at the Midnight. Thanks again to the Midnight for opening its doors to us so early in the morning. The idea behind this panel comes from the fact that concerns about the environment are more pressing today than they've ever been. The conversation was meant to be a deep dive into the issues on how we can use the arts to actually inspire environmental change. The panelists for this panel included Megan Murphy, who is the Green Hands coordinator for the St. Augustine Amphitheater, Kentucky Costellow, an environmental educator for the city of Gainesville, as well as band member of Guts, which played Changeville this year, and Trish Riley, the director of Cinema Verde, a nonprofit film festival here in Gainesville that we partnered with this year for our films. The moderator on this panel was Sampson, the director of We Are Neutral, a nonprofit here in Gainesville that we've partnered with for the last 2 years to offset the carbon footprint of the festival. And with that, I'll let Anna take it away.
So I appreciate everybody coming today. We're going to have, like Brandon said, another crowd of people coming in, and at that point we'll probably pause to introduce ourselves. But we can go ahead and get started a little bit. I want to thank Frank for having this conference. It's really awesome that it's hosted here in Gainesville and also Changeville. It's a music festival, but like Brandon said, it's really actively creating change here in Gainesville and in other places. And thanks to the Midnight for having us here. This panel is how to use the arts to inspire environmental change. My name is Sampson, and I'm the director of an environmental nonprofit called We Are Neutral, and we create local carbon offsets and do local carbon reduction projects so that we can make businesses, organizations, music festivals, individuals carbon neutral. So basically we calculate carbon footprints and we figure out what your environmental impact is, and then we do enough positive change to make you carbon neutral. We have worked with a lot of music festivals and music venues. We work with Bonnaroo, Gasparilla, Fest, Okeechobee, Forum, Arco Santi, venues like Spirit of the Swanee, St. Augustine Amphitheater. So I feel like we have a lot of experience in seeing how the arts can inspire environmental change. And I'll be moderating the panel today, keep the conversation going. And these 3 wonderful people here also have a lot of experience in actively or seeing how arts have inspired environmental change. So I'd like to take a minute for the 3 of them to introduce themselves, your name, your title, the organization or business that you work for or with, and why don't you also tell us your favorite place on earth? Trish, you want to start us off? There's a microphone for you.
So I'm Trish Riley, and I'm the director of Cinema Verde. You guys have got the programs. We kicked off last night. We partnered with Changeville for the films at the Hippodrome last night and tonight. Super excited about that, and had a wonderful opening night reception if you weren't able to join us. And we'll be at the Heartwood Sound Stage on the weekend. And this is definitely this is our 9th year, and it's certainly shaping up to be the best festival we've ever had. I came to this as an environmental journalist. I started writing in '92 for the Miami Herald. Coincidentally, the first gig I had was as a film reviewer for the Herald, and did that for about a year. Then they turned me on to schools coverage. So I covered schools for about 10 years, 60 schools in Broward and Dade County. And as I did that, I became more and more aware of environmental issues. I'd always cared about the environment. I had the chance to grow up playing in the woods every day. And then about the time I went to college, they tore that woods down and turned it into a development. And that's when I realized, the world doesn't realize the importance of these trees and these plants, which I learned about as a kid and I understood innately. And so I was really fortunate as a journalist to be able to participate in workshops and opportunities to learn from the experts in the field for 25 years. And over the course of that time, I realized, well, let me tell how I got to that. When I would cover kids' science fairs, for example, I would focus in on kids who were turning rat poop into energy and things like that. And I learned that I had to tuck those into stories to try to get that information to the public. If I went to my editors and said, huge story here, the beaches are closed because of contamination, and the newspaper and the government claims it's because too many birds are pooping along the shoreline, but we know that's not true. Anyone in the field of science and water understands it's because there's an open outflow of sewage at the coastlines, and but the paper wouldn't cover that because advertisers are the ones responsible for creating the pollution, and also another big supporter of the newspapers would be the real estate community that wanted to sell houses, and nobody wanted to buy a house in a place that was being shit on. So I developed this technique of tucking the information into the story in a really, it's a travel story, and it's all about going to the Everglades National Park and talking to the rangers about the problems and what people are doing and how tourists can help them, and not stepping on seagrasses when you go snorkeling and things like that. And became, I guess, rather adept at that. And so now, after doing that for about 25 years, the internet happened, and I realized that journalists were, I think 40,000 journalists lost their jobs, and they all became freelancers. I was a freelancer. And so the competition became stiff, and the pay dropped from $2 a word to maybe 20 cents if you were lucky, but lots of times there were so many people out there pushing free information to publishers, and publishers' budgets were cut so drastically that they could not, people couldn't get paid anymore because all this free stuff was out there. And that's where we end up with the news that we have today, that you can't really rely on it being accurate anymore. It comes from marketers or anybody who wants coverage. But anyway, that's part of my story, but not the intro. I'll pass it on. That's a little bit about me.
Hey everyone, my name is Kentucky Costellow, and I'm about to graduate from the University of Florida with a degree in Natural Resources Conservation. I also happen to work for the City of Gainesville Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs Department in the Nature Operations Division, which is quite a mouthful. But in my department, I am the Recreation Leader for Environmental Education, so a lot of what I do is teaching kids and visitors and adults about nature. We also do interpretation on our 1870s living history farm, which is really fun because I get to dress up in period costume and make cornbread over a cast iron stove and things like that. So that's mostly what I do in Gainesville. In my free time, I also do a lot of outdoor recreation, backpacking and paddling, and going to the springs and things like that.
I'm Megan. I am the Green Hands Coordinator for the Cultural Events Division in St. Johns County. I'm kind of a behind-the-scenes kind of gal, not really one to talk in front of people, but I'm really excited to be here and be a part of this conversation. A little bit about me. I do not have a background in sustainability. I didn't study it other than feeling passionately about the world around me and about the world I'm raising my son in. I didn't have much of a background. I worked at QCS here for a few years. But other than that, I actually came from the opposite end of the spectrum, and I was a sous chef on tour for a few bands for quite a number of years, and I saw all the waste that was created within this part of the arts community, and it was depressing and upsetting. So when I got the opportunity to launch this program for the Cultural Events Division in St. Johns County, I was really excited about it. I wanted to see those changes, and if we were able to do it and let other people know within the community that it was possible, that's what we're doing, that's what we're here for. Green Hands is our greening initiative. Essentially, it's our steps towards minimizing our footprints as venues. We have the St. Augustine Amphitheater and the Panelists concert hall. in Ponte Vedra, we did not start with much of a backing from the county. We've kind of had to push our way into the spotlight, working with people like Anna and trying to work within our community. And I mean, our community is really supportive. It's taken a lot to get the county on board. But it's exciting and it's growing. This is our 3rd year, and it's bigger than ever, and we're starting to get a lot of discussion within the industry-wide. We're talking, to people throughout the country who are trying to launch similar programs. So it's really excited to kind of be at the forefront of that and make the change that is possible, but people don't think is. So that's it. I don't really have a favorite place on Earth.
Yeah, you got it.
I remembered. I would like to see every place on Earth, and then I'll make that decision.
That's great.
Can I answer?
Yes, you
Okay.
can.
I also forgot to say that I play drums in Guts Gainesville, which I think
that's
is
important.
an important piece of like being part of the arts. We played at like 11:30 p.m. last night, and I think I went to bed around like 2:30. So, so here I am. I made it. But my favorite place so far that I've been on Earth is Tulum, Mexico. I had the best day of my life there at an ecological park called Xel-Há. If you ever get a chance to go there, it's incredible. It's like an all-natural freshwater lagoon that has zip lines into it. Just
Sounds
saying.
amazing.
Just plugging Tulum.
I guess I'll throw that in too before I give it back to Anna. Like Megan, I've not been everywhere I want to go, but I've really loved Costa Rica, and I knew that I always would. And when you hear those howler monkeys rumbling in the background, it's just amazing. But last time I came home from there, and I sat back down on my deck here in the heart of Gainesville, right downtown. I have a little woods and creek right behind my house, and that's where I spend almost all of my time. And every time I have a chance to sit out there and work, I feel like I'm the luckiest person in the world. I am not in a cubicle. I'm working on my deck with my laptop. It's fantastic.
I'm partial to Gainesville too. Some of you kind of touched on this a little bit. A lot of us in this room, a lot of people that are here at Changeville and Frank, we're change makers, we're change agents. But there's a lot of topics, there's a lot of areas that need improvement. I mean, dogs need homes and whales need saving and poverty and wildlife conservation. And so I want to touch a little bit, I think it's worth hammering in again, why the environment? Like why should we care? Why are the 4 of us sitting up here with this topic and we're not on a panel about any of the other, millions of topics or issues that need our attention? I know, Trish, you said something, about it being innate, and that's how it feels for me. I feel like when I was little and I found out where paper came from, it was like a kid figuring out where meat came from. It was like, what? And then I was just never the same. It felt like wrong, and that's just how I've been. But I want everybody to kind of touch again, like if there was a moment or, why in this short life that we have is this the topic that you've chosen to be passionate about or to do something about?
I don't feel like I chose it. It just, it's just, I've always just been doing this because it seemed like the thing to do, and along the way, because it's never paid, I mean, you get into this kind of work. And so my mother even has suggested perhaps I ought to go get a job. A guy I was once married to said, why don't you get a job at Publix so you can make some money? I'm like, come on, pal. I don't know how I could ever do that. So instead I got rid of him, and now I just support myself on nothing. It really works. Yeah. So,
Great.
Well, I think the reason why I care so much about the environment is because I don't know if you guys know this or not, but human beings and all other living things on Earth can't survive without water. Mm-hmm. So that was something that when I came to Florida for the first time to look at the massage school here, I got here and I saw the Itchtucknee River, and I realized, before that I had kind of a history of, I like in the environment, I like to be outside, but seeing the Itchtucknee River and realizing that this beautiful fresh water flows, we have so many first magnitude springs in North Florida. That was something that moved me so much that it drew me to study at the University of Florida for my degree. So that's something that's really inspired me. I think the first moment that I really came to the realization of, oh, there's an environment around me and we should probably protect it, probably came from growing up on a farm. I was homeschooled, and so I was basically allowed to run around in the woods and kind of explore on my own, and being out in nature, running through a creek, crushing up leaves and smelling them. There were all these senses that I experienced as a kid, and it has, I think, fostered this love of the environment, love of the outdoors. I think that was probably like the moment for me.
I kind of leapt into this world, and once you leap into it, as I'm sure everyone in this room knows, you can't jump back out of it, and it becomes all-encompassing. Everything you do, everything you think about is now a part of this thought process, especially with where I am not a very technologically inclined person, but I see with raising my son, and obviously that's the thing everyone thinks about is the future and my son's future and all that, but to see how much I have to fight and advocate for him at this point. He's only 3 years old. It makes me want to just work hard now to make it easier so people don't have to continue to advocate so hard for the things that matter, the things that are important, the things that keep us alive. And it's as simple as that. I mean, everything involves sustainability and the future. Like I think we live in a world where instant gratification kind of rules all of our many of our decisions, and that's something that's been really tough for me to see. And it's tough for us I think you have to slow down to be able to get the full picture. This whole world is really overwhelming. I'm overwhelmed by it all the time when you're in this world, because it's constantly changing and you're constantly fighting your battles. And without getting too political and all, I think now more than ever it's become very apparent that this is necessary, period. It's necessary to fight for our lives at this point and the lives of everything that surrounds us. So that's
great answers. Yes, please.
So I would just like to chime in and just say that conservation is a bipartisan issue. Like, no matter where you fall on the spectrum of politics, everyone needs clean air. Everyone needs clean water. We're losing soil at an incredible rate. Like, actual farmable topsoil is being lost largely to erosion. That is something that everyone should care about, because we all need food to survive, right? So I was reading yesterday about the 5 emotions that drive social change. And the first one is kind of like fear, and then urgency, and then hope, and then like a sense of solidarity, and then actually doing the action where you're starting to create the change. And so when I was asked to speak on this panel, I really thought, how can I bring a sense of hope and solution to the table and not scare people? Not say, hey, do you guys realize that we may not be able to farm in 60 years? Like, that's a really scary thing to bring up. And that, to me, instills a sense of urgency and fear. But instead of coming from that place, it's like, can we look at it and look to the kids of the future and say, hey, y'all are very smart. Can you come up with some ways that we can, preserve our topsoil so that y'all can have food in the future? You know what I mean? So looking to the future generation to help us problem solve for past generations, I think, is really important. And that's something that we're doing with Earth Academy Day Camp that I run at my work. Our spring break camp is actually going to be focused on what kids around the world are doing now to deal with the effects of climate change, like what Trish brought up with the science project where children were taking rat poop and turning it into fuel. That's incredibly innovative, and kids and teenagers they have access to technology and information, and so I think really the hope for me is within the youth. And I think it's important not to get lost in the urgency and the fear, but to move past that and say, okay, we need to make some changes, but how can we do that together? And I do think that, once again, just to drive it home, like, conservation is a bipartisan issue. So, yeah, I love that. It's a nonpartisan issue. Yeah. Exactly. Thank you.
I want to touch on that too. I think, when I was little, I had all these shirts that said, save the planet, I'm going to save the planet, I'm going to save the planet. And then the comedian George Carlile comes in and says, like, we have some audacity to think that the planet's in trouble. Like, she's going to be fine. We, are the ones that are in trouble. And so I had to change my why, my reason, to being, we're just too damn creative and resourceful not to figure this out, right? I mean, especially like this innovation, it's like, this is problem solving. I think that we're all able to figure this out, and there's no good reason for us not to. The next question I really want to, please, I give you permission to be as long-winded as possible, because this is really what we're going to talk about today, is, how have you all successfully, or how have you seen it done successfully using the arts to inspire environmental change? What programs are you leading, or have seen, or have you started that have in this, okay, now we get it, we know we need to do something, we're too resourceful not to. Now, specifically the arts, and there's a lot of different ways to go about this, but how, and the arts is a broad term, I actually wrote it down, the expression or application of human creative skill and imagination, typically in a visual form, such as painting or sculpture, producing works to be appreciated primarily for their beauty or emotional power. So I think, we can think of the arts as being a pretty broad topic here, but how have you, or have you seen the arts influence environmental change?
Sweet. Yeah, okay. So I've been thinking about this a lot, obviously, since I was invited to talk on this panel. And I think there's several different ways that that the arts can inspire environmental change. So first of all, you can throw out data and numbers and statistics about environmental change, or about climate change, or we're losing all this soil, or we have all these chemicals in our water, or whatever, and people kind of glaze over, and I think the difference between coming at it from me, like being a scientist, and saying, hey, I can give you all these numbers all day, but that might not inspire change, right? Art, however, draws the human emotion. So, for instance, some examples of things that I've seen where people were using the arts to inspire environmental change. I watched a video which was a time lapse over the course of 1 or 2 years of a glacier melting. And that, to me, is something, I may never go see that glacier, right? But because someone who does ice climbing and cares about that glacier had the forethought to say, hey, this glacier looks like it's shrinking, I'm going to film it over the course of time so that other people can then care about this glacier and understand the magnitude of what the how the climate is changing. Because climate change is this very slow, progressive thing. And if you think about geologic time versus human time, geologic time is infinite. Human time is like a, what is the people say, like a blink of an eye, right? Compared to geologic time. So if you're trying to explain to someone, well, yeah, climate is changing, and they say, well, it's been changing for a long time, and it's like, yeah, but this is going a lot faster, right? So we're speeding up this natural process, and I think a lot of people who don't believe in climate change say, use that argument. They say, well, it's changed before, but the Anthropocene era that we're in now, really is speeding up those natural processes. And so I don't know if any of you, by show of hands, did anyone see the video circulating a couple months ago? It was like a starving polar bear. Did anyone see that? Okay, that was an example, I think, of how someone was using this media to demonstrate something that was really sad, but I will tell you something that is also really sad. We're losing microbes in our soil and macroinvertebrates at an alarming rate as well, which directly connect to the food webs that feed all of this wildlife that they call it like characteristic wildlife, where people really care about polar bears, right? But we're losing things in our own ecosystems that, like our native pollinators, for instance. We got into a conversation about this last night. We were talking about invasive species, and Florida has more invasive species than any other state. not just mammals and amphibians, but plants as well. And one of my former positions with the city was removing invasive plants. And so people are always asking me, like, well, everything has a right to live, you know? And I would say, yeah, absolutely. Okay, it's here on this planet, it has a right to live. You know, I had a volunteer tell me, I feel bad that I'm pulling out coral ardesia from the ground. Like, I feel bad for the plant. And I said, I understand, and I hear you. And also, coral ardesia has a right to live where it's native, which is in Asia. And so when you allow, for instance, iguanas in South Florida are a huge problem. There are non-native invasive species down there. Someone on the internet was saying, I feel really sad that it froze and all the iguanas are dying. And I said, hey, I hear you. I care about iguanas too. Iguanas are pretty cool. But also, it's good that it froze and that they are no longer there because they displace native species. And so when people want to have the argument and not look at the intensity and the impact that, for instance, like invasive species have on whether or not we'll have food availability, that's something where I think using my social capital as an artist or as someone who posts on Instagram or as an environmental educator, it's my responsibility to bring up that point and say, yes, everything has a right to live that's here, but also we need to think about the consequences of those actions. I really love Instagram, and I'm totally going to plug Instagram for a second because I have found that Instagram is a tool that is an art. You're taking a photograph or a video and you can share it with thousands of people instantly. So that has become, for me, a method of environmental education. So I'm out backpacking or I find a really neat plant or animal that I want to photograph and share with people. And so that has become a platform for me to be able to share, hey, this is a really neat turtle that I have at my work, and her name is Clarissa, and she's a Florida box turtle, and you know, this is what she eats, this is where she likes to live. And then, you know, I get all these likes and people are like, wow, I had no idea that was a Florida box turtle. Or, oh wow, I had no idea that you can't put gopher tortoises in the water if you find them. They'll drown. You know, things like that. And I think that a lot of people who are in the environmental movement are very anti-technology, but I actually feel opposite about it. I actually think that we need to harness that technology and get people engaging, even if it's just from an Instagram post, and say, oh, whoa, that person's going backpacking. I could go backpacking, or I could go outside. I could go and find a Florida box turtle. Or does that make sense? I think that those are ways that we can use it to our advantage to make sure that everyone has as much information as possible, and inspire that environmental and social change. So,
where do we find you on Instagram?
At Tiny Fruit Bats.
All right.
That was awesome. I come from the music world, the music side of the arts. So for us, we kind of have this privilege of using this very celebratory side of the arts to inspire people. We play off their excitement at the shows, at the concerts, and we just add on to that. So we more so than educating people, we kind of lead by example. We make it accessible. We fight for the changes that we can make in order to make it accessible for everybody. The coolest thing about it is in this industry, there's it's such a wide demographic of people. It's everyone from our community. Everyone comes out for music. Like I said, it's a fun, celebratory event. So to be able to use that is really awesome and almost our responsibility. And like I said, to come from a world that creates so much waste. These events, as Anna knows, with festivals and stuff, there's so much waste in this world. People want to have fun, they want to have their drinks, all of that. So we've kind of utilizing the resources that we have. Like I said, we haven't gotten a lot of support, so we've had to push these programs. So kind of one step at a time, we've implemented these programs. We started with the One Less Plastic Bottle program. We installed water refill stations throughout our venues. We got rid of all single-use plastic water bottles. We have people come, they can bring their own refillable water container. And there's the people who really care about that and think it's awesome. And then there's the people who think it's awesome because they don't want to spend $4 on the boxed water at the concessions. There's people who want to do that too, but that's why we have boxed water. It's an option. But we started with that, and we've kind of grown that got a lot of response, and we've kind of grown the program from that. We still need single-use options at these events, so everything we have transitioned to all biodegradable single-use options, and people think you can't do that in 4,000 capacity venues. Everybody has to have their straw, their beer cup, whatever. But it is possible, and that's the way we utilize this arts, is to educate people on that side of it. This season we launched our last straw program, so we aren't handing out straws. We're gonna get some backlash. Absolutely, but that's our opportunity to educate people, and that's where we open up that conversation. We have straws available. I think the biggest aspect for us is letting people make that choice, giving them all these options and giving them the choice, because people want choice, especially when they're out, whatever. There are questions like, well, is my cup gonna dissolve with this Jack Daniels in it? What are you telling me? Like, I don't want to know about this. I just want to drink and have fun and dance and whatever. So there's that side of it. But like I said, we're able to reach, maybe this demographic of people that have never even thought about anything like that. Because at one point, none of it, we all were that way. We didn't think about any of this. And like I said, past 3 years, I dove into it. Before that, I recycled and I was passionate about the environment, but I didn't dive into the depths of what all this is and it's a confusing world, and it's forever changing, which is good because that just means we're progressing. But yeah, so that's kind of what we've done. We've launched multiple programs. We have a huge garden. We utilize for all our artists flowers and our catering. We have a big compost. We compost everything backstage, and we kind of do what we can. I guess that's about it. It's really exciting, and like I said, we have the privilege of playing off of really happy times. And
I know this is about using the arts to get messages across, and so of course that's what we do with Cinema Verde. As I mentioned before, the world of writing had changed so much. I didn't feel like that was a good way to convey a message because no one would know whether or not it was accurate. And so I turned my attention toward using film to reach the public, and have developed Cinema Verde as a way to give a forum to the filmmakers who, and believe me, in these environmental films, they don't have big marketing behind them, so they're doing it on a song because it's important to them, just like everyone else here. But it does give us a chance to present the information in a palatable way, very quickly, maybe an hour. I tell them to make those films as short as possible so I can show as many as I can. And then to sit down with scientists on hand, experts on hand, filmmakers on hand, to really answer questions and help people see, how can they participate in improving the situation. But I've, over the years, developed a couple of strategy ideas on this. I don't think that we're going to change the world by learning how to recycle necessarily as individuals, because we're small and the world is huge. As long as the companies that make plastic continue to make plastic that contaminates the water and the air that we breathe and kills all these animals, then we have a problem, and we're not going to correct it by recycling the stuff. The chemicals are still there. So who we have to reach are the top echelons of those companies, and the green investment companies help us that way by talking to shareholders and actually do affect real change. When I think about it, the numbers change all the time, but there are about 40 richest people in the world. They are parts of those big companies. They're the people that I think we need to reach. You remember the deal about Margaret Mead? And we actually have more power than they have, even though they've cut all the money, because we're the voices and we're the people who buy their products. So what I try to do is, I continue to try to raise enough visibility of Cinema Verde and the voices of the filmmakers that we try to help amplify so that we can reach those 10 or 40 people or whoever they are. Half of them are already on board. Bill Gates has huge environmental initiatives. We can do this. It's really not outside our reach. And a good example of that is the ozone. As soon as everyone realized that using certain fluorocarbons, something fluorocarbon, was causing this big problem, a regulation was passed. The problem, I just read the other day that the ozone hole is getting smaller as a result of that. It was a really quick and easy transition. All it took was people to understand that it was important and necessary to do. And we can do that, even though it seems overwhelming, and I feel as if I've been screaming into the wind for now about 25 or 30 years. We can do it. And it's thanks because you guys pay attention and you make those choices, as Megan was discussing.
That's awesome. The next question's hard. Yeah, you have a question?
I just had a question. Just to touch on a few of the things that you folks have mentioned so far. One of which is the sense of despair, which can often come when we alert people to the problems because they seem so vast. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the work of Joanna Macy. She's a longtime environmentalist, ecologist, ecologist, that's it, who actually has been writing about the environmental concerns and talks about it from the standpoint of our grief that we all suffer from when we recognize these issues. I'm an artist, and I find oftentimes that the despair can be overwhelming. So some of the work that she's done is called the work that reconnects. It allows us to perhaps go deeper in to determine why this grief. Some people, like in a family when someone is, terminally ill, some people will turn away, deny, can't face it. And that's what I think a lot of our society is dealing with right now. There are groups of individuals that can't face it. Then there are others who are willing to accept it, who feel overwhelmed and can't function around it. And then there are others who are hopeful, like you said. So how do we migrate those groups that we need to move towards a more hopeful view? Often means getting in touch with what that grief means for us and utilizing the vocabularies, and that's where arts comes in, because artists have an opportunity to find a creative way to message those important, often very hard to identify or deep feelings that we have about our connection to our Mother Earth. And so I'm asking this question of the panel. In your own efforts, have you been able to tap into that grief and make it useful rather than, overwhelming? And I think that helps me as an artist to see if there are avenues, because I deal with this daily, I'm telling you, because I am active as an artist and an activist, so asking.
That was actually one of my questions. It's completely overwhelming, and I'll answer it also is that I tell people all the time that if I thought about this 24/7, I think about the rabbit hole of a cup of coffee and the beans being picked and then transported and the water being heated up and somebody working the register and me driving my car to you know what I mean, that would make me rock back and forth in a corner, and I want to take a nap, and I'm no good if that's what I'm doing, and so I think it's a lot of self-awareness and a lot of self-work. Fast fashion is a terrible thing. My clothes are from a secondhand store, but they're still probably terrible. But I feel cute in this outfit, and it allows me to get up here and talk in front of people. So it's a balance, and it's, I think happy people, optimistic people are efficient people. And we are neutral. I try always for my employees to be happy, optimistic. We focus on the solutions. So it's very discouraging, but it's very important to do that mental work, to grieve, and to go through that process so that you are motivated, you continue to be motivated. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about that. It's a really good question.
So that takes us back to the idea that maybe I should just get a job at Publix, right? Because I definitely think about it. What am I doing? Why am I doing this? But then, like I said before, I don't know what else I would do. How could I possibly just go work like a drone someplace for someone else's goals when I have learned through my work as a journalist how very important this is? Which also leads me to finishing the intro that I was telling. In the world of journalism, there's something called objectivity. And so we're not supposed to come across as an advocate. People sometimes accuse me of being an advocate, and I really bristle. I'm a journalist, what are you talking about? But the way I feel about it is I've spent a lot of time learning the science behind this from the top experts, and I know how important it is. I have now a responsibility to make sure the public gets that information, and that's what drives me. Again, I don't really believe it's going to be like we need to become pilgrims again. There are a few main things that have gotten us into this situation. Number one is our use of petrochemicals. Petrochemicals pollute the air when we burn them. They pollute the water when we incorporate them into plastics or pharmaceuticals. They kill us. And if we could just stop that and keep the rest of that stuff in the ground and develop the renewable energies that we have and utilize the benefits of herbal plants, that's learning to live sustainably. The way the earth seems to have been designed, as part of the universe. And animals, the way we treat animals is along the same lines. And then something like, 1700s, there was a guy named Descartes who says that animals didn't have feelings or thoughts. He was wrong. But a whole bunch of science has been placed on that. There's been a wonderful thing in Cambridge Declaration of scientists, including Stephen Hawking, saying, wait a minute, we were wrong about that. Animals actually do have thoughts, and they have feelings, and they have consciousness. Even plants have consciousnness. If we could only recognize the livingness of everything that is part of our universe and respect that, I think, that would give us a whole new perspective, and we would understand the importance of trying to keep it going.
Because I leapt into this position full on, I spent many nights waking up in the middle of the night in complete despair. I spent weeks depressed, for sure. I'm like, what have I been doing with my life? What am I doing with my, all of these things need to change. Huge things need to change. They need to change from the top. And I think my best resource is people like these wonderful people up here with me now, these minds, these people who are working on these incredible projects that I'll never get to. I'll never, I am in a network now with these people who are educating me every day. And I think utilizing, going back to that, utilizing our resources and knowing that we have all these incredible resources. I am good at social media. I have no education when it comes to social media, but it's a tool that people are using, and that's awesome. And understanding that we have the minds, we have the resources to make every change that needs to happen, and focusing on that, and focusing on the hope and the positive, and knowing that everyone we talk to is an opportunity to educate, even on a small scale. Even bringing my bags to the market every week, every day, anywhere I go, making these changes and being and leading by example, and always being open to education and other people's point of views. And I think that is the main, I think just utilizing each other and being excited about all these incredible things that all these people are doing around the world. And going on social media, I do the same thing, and I'll go one direction where I'm like, I wish I was on that mountain right now, but no, utilizing that the same way. Well, let me get to that mountain. How do I get to that mountain? So it's the same thing. Like, what can I do every day to get to that mountain, or to get to that project, to get to this goal that I have? And prioritizing and organizing is a huge part of that, and not getting overwhelmed. For someone like me, I get very easily overwhelmed, and when you go into the rabbit hole, you start Googling stuff, and there's so much information out there. Some of it is legit, some of it's not. There's such a vast And who am I to say what is and what isn't when I don't know it, so it's all about the research, and I don't know.
It has to be non-anecdotal, NIH, peer-reviewed data.
So I also just wanted to add quickly that voting is really important, and with the stages of grief, I think there's a lot of things have come about from people being angry, and I think anger is an important emotion that we shouldn't shy away from. Like, if you're really upset that, for instance, there was a river up north that caught on fire, and that's why we have the Clean Water Act. I don't know if you guys know that or not. It wasn't the first time. Yeah, thank you, the Cayuga, in Ohio. I didn't want to say the wrong state, but the Cayuga in Ohio caught on fire. But that wasn't the first time that river had caught on fire. That just happened to move some people who got upset about it and rallied for change. So I think also putting your anger and your grief into legislation and into local politics that and backing certain legislation that will protect the things you care about is incredibly important. Not just with the environment, but with social issues or other things that you care about. In Alachua County, we specifically have a couple of different initiatives. Our citizens voted on a 50-cent sales tax called Wild Spaces Public Places that will, over the next 3 years, will go towards improving our nature parks and some other really important projects. So I think fueling that emotion that you were talking about earlier into things like that is definitely an important way of affecting environmental change. Yeah.
And I have one last question that I think is so important to ask and to end on. These arts inspiring us like so much. Like, I go to a concert at St. Augustine Amphitheater, and I know they're carbon neutral, and I know Megan, and all of it just makes me so excited, and I go home and I'm pumped. And these kind of panels, they make me pumped. And Cinema Verde, again, you guys please attend Cinema Verde. It's amazing. Documentaries for me are a huge thing. But unfortunately, that emotional power of the arts is sometimes temporary, right? We're all going to walk out of here and be like, man, like, God, let's do it. And then sometimes it's fleeting. I mean, you've got to pick up your kids, you have laundry, there's just a lot going on. Everybody is fighting for our attention. Every commercial, everything online. And it's hard. So my question, and I don't have an answer, and it's a hard question, but I would like to leave everybody with this, is how do we stay inspired? After that documentary, I saw the starving polar bear. It made me mad for a few days, but not a few years, it's fleeting. So how can we, and you guys have mentioned a lot of it, Google things, vote, there's a lot, but how can we continue this inspiration that's come from the arts or peer pressure or whatever it is, guilt, grief, how can we try to facilitate that being more constant and keeping that with us?
So I'm going to give you a real quick answer, and then I apologize, but I've got to run. I've got to get down to our venue and do a little setup. I'm meeting someone from out of town who's come to help us. But my answer on that is pretty simple, and that's why I do the work that I do. I feel like if we inform people, once you know this, you can't unknow it. You don't have to try to convince yourself or pray to become inspired about it. You understand it, and then you don't question it. And I guess that's where your inspiration comes from, your knowledge. So let me leave with that. If you want to talk about it more, please join us at Cinema Verde. We'll be at the Hippodrome tonight, Heartwood Soundstage over the weekend. It's going to be really great. And by the way, I also wanted to say I've had a wonderful opportunity to be able to work with all three of these ladies. And through the course of Cinema Verde, I'm honored to be able to be here to share our work with you all.
Thank you, Trish. Thank you, Trish. So what I would say is my recommendation for keeping the fire burning, as it were. I am a firm believer that if you go out into nature and you have positive experiences in nature, you're going to want to protect it. So for me, I try to spend as much time as I possibly can in nature. A lot of my vacations are nature-based. Like I said earlier, I do a lot of backpacking, I do a lot of paddling, and that to me, really inspires me to continue the work that I'm doing. In Gainesville here, I don't know if you all are residents of Gainesville, if you're just visiting, we have more than 26 nature parks. We're very fortunate to have that many nature parks and conservation lands here in Gainesville. I encourage you to go take a hike in one of our city nature parks. They're very accessible. Most of them are within 5 miles of any direction that you drive from here. And I think really just, if you love the beach, go and sit at the beach and think about how you can protect it. Draw inspiration from nature. I think we're animals, and it's completely natural for us to draw inspiration from our environment and from nature. And so that's what I would encourage everyone to do. Go take a hike.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Kentucky. I think knowing the vastness of education out there leads me and continues to excite me, and I try to stay excited about that and learning things even on this, not even, very much so on this panel this morning, and knowing that every time I talk about things, it excites me, so keeping that conversation open and continuing to talk about things, and very much so connecting with nature, with the world, with everything you're fighting for, both our natural resources, but also our community resources, and starting there. I think that's the biggest thing. My biggest motivator and inspiration. I live in St. Augustine, and it's a small community, but it's a passionate community, and it's a very transient community as well, because there's a really large tourism industry there. So we almost have to, it's a fight to promote all of this underneath all of that. So it's exciting to see that and to work small and start there and to continue to work on that and see it, because when you're working within your own community too, you see it, you see the effects of the work you're doing, and I think that is a motivator. We partnered with our local elementary school and raised funds for them to create their own greening initiative, and they chose to install water refill stations at their school, so we bought them and we installed them, and they all got refillable bottles, and they talk about it anywhere within the community. You see these families, and that's really exciting, because that's just one small detail in all of that, and continuing to educate, I think, and be educated.
Youth for the future. The youth is really our biggest hope.
Yeah. Well, I thank you all so much for your attention and your presence.